Cameras were rolling live. Nora Fatehi saw a woman in the audience. And that woman changed Nora's entire world. It was a Tuesday night taping of The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. The energy in Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center was electric as always. 300 audience members. The rainbow-lit set glowing under studio lights, the Roots warming up in their corner, and Jimmy Fallon preparing for another episode of the show that had made him America's favorite late-night host. Tonight's guest was Nora Fatehi, the Moroccan-Canadian dancer, actress, and global sensation who had taken the entertainment world by storm. She'd conquered Bollywood, her dance videos had billions of views, and she'd become one of the most recognizable faces in international entertainment. She walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, wearing an elegant designer dress, her signature confidence radiating as she waved to the crowd. Jimmy greeted her with his trademark enthusiasm, and they settled into what seemed like a standard celebrity interview. Talk about her latest projects, maybe a funny story, perhaps a dance demonstration. Everything was going exactly as planned. Nora sat in the guest chair, crossing her legs, answering Jimmy's first question about her recent film. She was charming, articulate, making the audience laugh with a story about a dance sequence that had gone hilariously wrong on set. And then, mid-sentence, she stopped. Her eyes had drifted past Jimmy, past the cameras, toward the tiered audience seating on her right. Her smile froze. Her hands, which had been gesturing animatedly, stopped mid-air and slowly fell to grip the armrests. Jimmy noticed immediately. "Nora? You okay?" She didn't respond. She was staring at someone in the audience with an expression that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. Shock, disbelief, and something deeper. Something that looked like recognition mixed with pain. Cameras were live when Nora Fatehi saw a woman in the audience, and that woman completely changed Nora's world. The woman sat in the third row, center section. Middle-aged, maybe 55, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style. She wore modest clothing, a cardigan over a plain blouse, nothing that would draw attention. She wasn't taking photos or waving like the other audience members. She was just sitting there, hands folded in her lap, staring back at Nora with the same expression of shocked recognition. Nora stood up. Not gradually, abruptly. The chair scraped backward across the stage floor with an audible screech. Jimmy's blue cue cards slipped from his hands and scattered across his desk. "Nora?" Jimmy's voice carried genuine concern now, the smooth host persona slipping into something more human. Nora took a step toward the edge of the stage, then another. She was moving toward the audience, her eyes never leaving that woman in the third row. The cameras scrambled to follow her, operators frantically adjusting angles to capture whatever was happening. The Roots stopped their background music. Questlove's drumsticks froze mid-air. The audience members began turning in their seats, following Nora's line of sight, trying to understand what had captured her attention so completely. Jimmy stood up behind his desk, one hand reaching out instinctively. "Nora, what? Mama?" Nora's voice cut through the studio, loud enough for the boom microphones to catch but trembling with emotion. "Mama, is that you?" The studio went completely silent. The woman in the third row stood up slowly, her hands moving to cover her mouth. Tears were already streaming down her face. She nodded, unable to speak. Nora stepped off the stage platform, not carefully down the steps, but directly off the edge, her heels clicking sharply against the studio floor. She was running now, actually running through the narrow aisles between audience rows, pushing past surprised attendees who instinctively made way. Jimmy Fallon stood frozen behind his desk, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. The control room had gone silent. Producers watching monitors, unsure whether to cut to commercial, nobody knowing what to do because nothing like this had ever happened before. Nora reached the third row and stopped directly in front of the woman. For 3 seconds, they just stared at each other. Mother and daughter. Separated by circumstances either had chosen, seeing each other for the first time in 18 years. Then Nora collapsed into her mother's arms, and both women began to sob, deep, body-shaking sobs that the microphones caught with devastating clarity. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Most chose silence, bearing witness to something that transcended entertainment, that felt too private and too profound for anything but respectful quiet. Jimmy walked out from behind his desk slowly, moving toward the audience section. His producer's voice was in his earpiece, asking what to do, whether to break for commercial. Jimmy pulled the earpiece out and dropped it on his desk as he passed. Jimmy stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 18 years earlier. Nora Fatehi wasn't always the global superstar performing for millions. She was once just Nora, a 16-year-old girl living in Toronto with dreams too big for her circumstances and a family situation that was falling apart in ways she couldn't control. Her parents, Moroccan immigrants who had worked brutal hours to build a life in Canada, were in the middle of a devastating divorce. Her father had moved back to Morocco. Her mother, Fatima, was struggling with depression and financial collapse, working 3 jobs just to keep their small apartment. Nora had the dance scholarship to a prestigious academy in Mumbai. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But it meant leaving home, leaving her mother, leaving everything she knew to chase a dream that might never materialize. Fatima insisted she go. "You have talent, Habibti," she would say, gripping Nora's face between her worn hands. "Real talent. You cannot waste it here. You must go." "But what about you, Mama? You need me here. I am strong. I will be fine. You go. You dance. You make something of yourself. That is what I need." Nora went. She was 16 years old, barely speaking Hindi, flying to a country she'd never seen to study at an academy that had accepted her based on a single audition video. The plan was for her mother to follow in 6 months once she'd saved enough money. 6 months became a year. Then 2 years. Phone calls became less frequent. Fatima worked nights, Nora's schedule was brutal, the time zones never aligned properly. Letters went unanswered. Emails bounced back. By the time Nora was 20, she'd lost contact with her mother completely. She'd tried everything. Calling old numbers that were disconnected, reaching out to relatives who claimed they didn't know where Fatima had gone, hiring investigators who came up empty. It was as if her mother had disappeared. Nora told herself that Fatima had moved on, started a new life, maybe didn't want the reminder of the daughter who had left. The guilt ate at her, the feeling that she'd abandoned her mother when she needed her most, that she'd chosen ambition over family. But she kept dancing. She kept working. She poured all that guilt and grief into her performances, becoming one of the most electrifying dancers in the industry. She booked films. She went viral. She became famous. And she never stopped looking for her mother. What Nora didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Fatima hadn't abandoned her. She'd been trying to find her daughter for 18 years. After Nora left from Mumbai, Fatima's mental health had deteriorated. She'd had a breakdown, spent 6 months in a psychiatric facility, lost her apartment, lost her phone, lost everything. By the time she recovered enough to try to contact her daughter, Nora had changed numbers, moved to different cities following work, become increasingly unreachable as her fame grew. Fatima had watched her daughter become a star from a distance. Seeing Nora's face on billboards, watching her dance videos online in public libraries because she couldn't afford a computer, crying with pride and heartbreak in equal measure. She'd written letters to Nora's management company. They'd been lost in piles of fan mail. She tried to attend Nora's performances. Security wouldn't let her backstage without credentials. She'd reached out on social media. Her messages were buried under millions of others. For 18 years, they'd been searching for each other, each convinced the other had moved on, each carrying guilt and grief that they had no way to share. Until tonight. When a friend of Fatima's, someone who worked at 30 Rock, had gotten her a ticket to The Tonight Show, not knowing Nora Fatehi would be the guest, not knowing what would happen when mother and daughter ended up in the same room for the first time since Nora was 16. subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Jimmy Fallon reached the third row where Nora and Fatima were still holding each other, both crying, both whispering words in Arabic that the microphones caught but most of the audience couldn't understand. "I'm so sorry, Mama," Nora kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I looked for you. I never stopped looking. I know, Habibti. I know. I watched you. I saw everything. I was so proud. So proud." Jimmy stood a few feet away, his own eyes wet with tears. The cameras had followed him, and now all of America was watching this reunion unfold in real time. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 90 seconds, Nora pulled back slightly, keeping her hands on her mother's arms as if afraid she might disappear again as she let go. "How?" Nora asked. "How are you here?" "My friend works here," Fatima said, her voice hoarse from crying. "She got me a ticket. I didn't know you would be here. I just wanted to see the show because..." She laughed through her tears. "Because you told me once, years ago, that you dreamed of being on The Tonight Show. And I thought maybe if I watched it, I would feel close to you." Nora made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I'm here, Mama. I'm actually here. And you're here. We're both here." Jimmy cleared his throat softly. Both women looked at him, seeming to remember suddenly that they were in the middle of a television taping with 300 people and millions of viewers watching. "I'm so sorry," Nora said, wiping her eyes. I saw her and I couldn't. Jimmy, this is my mother. I haven't seen her in 18 years. Don't apologize," Jimmy said, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't you dare apologize." He looked at Fatima. "Ma'am, would you mind coming up on stage with us? I think everyone here would like to hear this story." Fatima looked terrified. "I'm not. I don't belong on television." "Mama, please," Nora said, taking her mother's hand. "Come with me." Behind the scenes, Fallon made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. Jimmy helped both women onto the stage, Nora holding her mother's hand the entire way as if afraid she might vanish if she let go. The audience erupted in applause. Not the usual celebrity applause, but something deeper, more reverent. Jimmy gestured to the guest chairs. "Please, both of you, sit." They sat together, Nora pulling her chair as close to her mother's as physically possible, their hands intertwined. Jimmy sat across from them, his usual interviewer's posture replaced by something softer, more human. "Nora," Jimmy said gently, "can you tell us what just happened?" Nora took a shaky breath. "That's my mother. Fatima. I left home when I was 16 to study dance in India. We were supposed to stay in touch, but..." Her voice broke. "Life happened. Mental health happened. Poverty happened. And we lost each other. For 18 years, I've been looking for her. And she was here. In the audience. Just here." Jimmy turned to Fatima. "And you had no idea Nora would be on the show tonight?" Fatima shook her head. "No idea. My friend got me this ticket last week. I came because this was your dream. And I thought if I couldn't find you, at least I could be in a place you once dreamed about." Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his blue cue cards, the same cards he used for every interview, covered in his own handwriting with jokes and questions he never asked tonight. He handed them to Nora. "Write down everything you want to tell her. Everything you've carried for 18 years. Don't lose these words again." Nora took the cards with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. She looked at her mother. "I never stopped loving you. I never stopped looking. I know, Habibti," Fatima whispered. "I always knew." The studio erupted. Standing ovation. The Roots began playing softly. Jimmy stepped back, letting them have this moment. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show, Jimmy arranged for Nora and Fatima to have a private room backstage for as long as they needed. They talked for 4 hours. Nora cancelled her next 3 appearances to spend time with her mother. Jimmy kept those blue cue cards. They sit framed in his office, blank except for tear stains. Beneath them, a plaque. The night television stopped and humanity began. Mother and daughter were never separated again.